There's a tired old talking point that shows up anytime Batman is trending. If he really wanted to help Gotham, he'd stop beating up the mentally ill and use his money to fix the city. It gets thrown around like it's some devastating gotcha, as if no one's ever thought of it before. But it's not clever or new, and it's definitely not accurate if you've actually watched Batman the Animated Series. Because in that show, Bruce Wayne does put his money to use. He funds shelters, orphanages, and free healthcare clinics. He doesn't just put on a cape and cowl and kick the crap out of criminals, he puts his money where his mouth is. And if you need proof, look no further than The Forgotten. This is the episode where Batman investigates homeless people going missing, the kinds of people the police aren't interested in finding. He loses his memory and ends up trapped in a modern-day slave camp, forced to experience the same poverty he's usually several steps removed from. Here he's just a man who doesn't know who he is, surrounded by the kind of people Gotham forgets, hence the title. Now, this episode is generally not considered one of the best, although its soundtrack is great, but it tells us a lot about Gotham City and the dire state it is in. The opening shows dishevelled men wandering the streets, and one of them helps himself to a pair of shoes from the bins, indicating his desperation. A behind-the-scenes note about this scene is that the network censors only allowed adult men to be depicted as homeless, because they didn't want kids to realise that women and children could end up on the streets too. This was the reality of kids' TV shows in the early 1990s. In capitalist societies especially, there's a dominant narrative that success is earned and poverty is deserved. Homelessness is framed as a result of laziness, addiction, or poor choices. But the reality is more complex than that. It could be caused by trauma, housing policy, mental health care failures, or economic instability. But the moral framing makes it easier for people to look away. If you convince yourself someone brought it on themselves, then you're absolved of responsibility. And in this episode, we see that Batman looks at the issue head on. He funds a homeless shelter and even helps to prepare food for the most needy. He's not doing it to boost his image, he genuinely wants to help these people. For its failings, this episode is arguably the most political. The show had a long history of showing disdain for the ultra-wealthy. Characters like Roland Daggett, Daniel Mockridge, and Ferris Boyle created the villains Clayface the Riddler and Mr. Freeze respectively, with their greed and lack of empathy, while socialites like Veronica Vreeland and Piers Chapman are presented as clueless dullards. But easily the most overt criticism of unchecked capitalism comes in the form of this episode's villain, Boss Biggis. Boss Biggis is beyond morbidly obese, gluttonous and furious that the people he's exploiting aren't working harder. He doesn't see his workers as people, he sees tools. Disposable ones at that. He locks homeless men in a canyon somewhere outside of Gotham, forces them to work in his mine, and pockets the profits. When they collapse from hunger or exhaustion, he blames them for being weak and lazy. Of course, it's nothing to do with the fact that he feeds them the bare minimum, watery gruel, and has them smash rocks all day. Meanwhile, he sits in comfort, stuffing his face with meat, wearing food stains like war medals commemorating every finished meal. Biggis is a walking punchline, and the joke is razor sharp. The man doing no labour is the one calling everyone else a freeloader. This isn't subtle in the slightest. Biggis hoards resources, controls the food, and uses violence to keep people in line. He is a capitalist caricature like something out of Soviet Revolution-era propaganda. The most evil thing about him isn't his greed, it's his complete lack of empathy. To him, people are only useful as long as they can be exploited. And when the men start to fall down at the point of exhaustion, he sends his henchmen to Gotham to round up more homeless people that nobody will miss. Now remember, criticising Boss Biggis isn't an endorsement of communism. Remember that I am European, many of the countries here are far more liberal than the United States, but it is a rejection of cruelty. If your takeaway from The Forgotten is that forced labour, hoarded wealth, and treating workers like disposable tools is somehow defensible, then you've missed the point entirely. The episode doesn't say, all capitalism is bad, it says exploitation is bad. And if your system requires people like Boss Biggis to function, maybe the problem isn't this critique, maybe the problem is the system. Now, that's not the only message in this episode. About halfway through, there's a dream sequence where Bruce Wayne is approached by a homeless man asking for money. He gladly hands over a few bucks, but before he knows it, he's surrounded by desperate people reaching out for money, and he's brought to tears by the scale of the human suffering. The message here is pretty clear. You can't solve a complex problem like homelessness with handouts. At least that's what Bruce Timm argued when he added this scene to the episode, to avoid it feeling like they were using genuine human suffering as set dressing. But what if that's exactly how you fix them, with the redistribution of resources, with empathy and action? There's an old saying, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, teach a man to fish, and he'll never go hungry. But what if there are no fish? Or worse, what if the pond is fenced off by people like Boss Biggis hoarding all the rods, charging for bait, working people to the bone, and then eating all the fish that they catch? It's a complicated situation because our society has been set up to support men like Biggis, people who describe themselves as leaders but don't actually do the necessary work. Sure, giving people extra money won't fix all of society's issues, but it'll definitely help. Universal basic income trials have proven that when people are given unconditional cash, they generally spend it wisely on food, rent, medicine, or education. The data is clear. Give people money and they use it to stabilize their lives. That's not a temporary fix, that's a solution. But I should clarify that Bruce Wayne's dream is not a warning about generosity, it's a glimpse of how much suffering still exists even in a world where he does fund shelters, orphanages and clinics. Batman can fight crime, but Bruce Wayne knows that real change takes more than fists. It takes funding, it takes care, and it takes showing up long after the villain is gone. He shows us that charity isn't weakness, it's responsibility. At the end of The Forgotten, Bruce Wayne offers the men jobs. It's meant to be a happy ending, a billionaire sweeping in to lift the downtrodden with good, honest work. But that final gesture subtly reinforces the idea that a person's dignity is tied to their productivity, that their worth is something they have to earn through labour. It's a neat, palatable conclusion, but it kind of ignores the deeper issue. These men don't lose their value when they lose their jobs. They didn't need employment to become human again. They needed safety, food, shelter, and compassion. The real problem isn't that they weren't working, it's that they were discarded the moment they stopped being profitable. So, okay, Bruce offers them a job, and this helps them get back on their feet. But he also buys into the same system that spat them out in the first place. Personally, I feel conflicted about the ending. In an ideal world, we would be able to just tax the rich more and provide strong social security for everyone. But in reality, it's more complicated than that because the rich don't just sit there and pay up. They adapt, and that's how they become rich. Large corporations often respond to higher taxes by protecting their bottom line, and that usually means cutting costs somewhere else. They might lay off workers, freeze wages, switch to cheaper inferior products, or move operations overseas where labour is cheaper and tax laws are friendlier. The result of this is that the most vulnerable people, the ones the taxes are meant to help, often pay the price instead. So the more I think about it, the more I understand why Bruce Timm insisted on adding that dream sequence. It alludes to the scale of the problem and the difficulty we face in solving it without bogging the entire episode down. The Forgotten isn't flashy, it's slow and a little clunky in places, and it doesn't always stick the landing. But what it lacks in polish, it makes up for in intention. This episode swings big, not just with its moving dream sequence or its Looney Tunes villain, but in what it dares to say about poverty, capitalism, and Batman himself. It's one of the few episodes where Batman doesn't just see Gotham's underbelly, he lives in it. And I kind of like the metaphor of the amnesia, even if it does feel like a tired trope, where his entire identity was taken away from him when he was kidnapped and forced into slavery. Even without his memories, he still has a hero's instincts, not as a vigilante looking down from a rooftop, but as a man stripped of privilege and dignity. In doing so, he gains a perspective that's harder to punch your way through. The story may end with a return to the status quo, a billionaire handing out jobs like golden tickets, but there's a deeper message here. That a system that reduces human worth to productivity is broken from the ground up. The real strength of The Forgotten is that it screams that people matter, even when they can't be monetized. And in that way, the episode mirrors its protagonist. It's flawed, idealistic, and not really sure how to solve the problems it raises, but at least it's trying. Just like Batman. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my channel members. Everyone who was a member at the time of this video's creation is listed on the screen right now. If you want to see your name amongst all these wonderful people, join the channel now. Next time, I'll be back on Monday for my 202nd video essay, and I want to mark the occasion by talking about Two-Face's shift in philosophy in the new Batman adventures. He had previously tried to control the underworld, but what happened to turn him into a domestic terrorist and drug kingpin? I have a theory. And next Friday, I'll be talking about the winners of my recent Batman Beyond villain poll, the pseudo-individualists, the Jokers, and how in trying so hard to stand out, they really just come across as pathetic tryhards. Hope to see you then.